Welcome back, everybody. It's Friday, October 24th, 2025. Today we'll be joined by AL.com reporter Margaret Cates, who will tell us about folks in one Alabama town who are facing sewage in their yards and having trouble getting enough water pressure to even flush the toilet. First, we had another nitrogen execution last night. We have another sports figure jumping into politics, and we have an update on the K. That's the future billion-dollar-plus K. Ivy Correctional Complex. My name's Ike Morgan, and we're down in Alabama. Alabama executed death row inmate Anthony Todd Boyd Thursday evening, reports AL.com's Ivana Rinke. Boyd had vocally maintained his innocence, even using his last words to say he did not participate in the 1993 killing of Gregory Hughley, although his recent legal efforts focused on the method of execution, nitrogen hypoxia. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled Thursday afternoon that the execution could go forward. Now, according to Ivana's eyewitness account, Boyd appeared to close his eyes at 5:59 p.m. and exhibited heaving and gasping in his breathing from 6:01 until about 6:16. The curtain to the viewing rooms was closed at 6:27, and the official time of death was 6:33 p.m. Now, Alabama Department of Corrections Commissioner John Hamm said he thought it was the longest nitrogen execution the state has conducted. Quote, "It was just a few minutes past some of the others. The times have varied on the others as well." End quote. Now, Boyd had been sentenced in the 1993 Talladega County burning death of Hughley, who was purported to owe Boyd a $200 drug debt. The jury found that he and two other men took Hughley at gunpoint, put him in a van, drove him to a ballpark, taped his hands, feet, and mouth, taped him to a park bench, doused him with gasoline, and set him on fire. In recent days, Boyd has claimed to be innocent, and he called on Governor Kay Ivey to meet with him before his execution. Ivey declined and issued a statement on Thursday. Quote, "After trial, the court found Anthony Boyd to have been an active and full participant in Mr. Hughley's horrific death, noting that he bound the victim's feet as the group prepared to burn him alive. After 30 years on death row, Anthony Boyd's death sentence has been carried out, and his victim's family has finally received justice." End quote. Former Alabama, NFL, and UFL quarterback A.J. McCarron framed his decision to run for lieutenant governor as giving back to the state. And he's already shown some Alabama political savvy by leaning more into football metaphor than any policy nuances that might separate him from the slate of Republicans already in the race. McCarron is the latest sports figure to become a figure in next year's Alabama elections, reports AL.com's Mike Kaysen. After Tommy Tuberville's candidacy for governor, Bruce Pearl's brief flirtation with a U.S. Senate seat, and Paul Feinbaum's ongoing consideration of that same U.S. Senate seat. In a video announcing his candidacy, McCarron spoke of the leadership skills he learned from football and made reference to an Auburn counterpart running for statewide office. Quote, "When Coach Tuberville is governor, I'll be the quarterback who helps pass his conservative outsider agenda. Alabama is my home. It's made me who I am, and I feel led from above to give back to the state that has given me so much." End quote. And like Feinbaum, he said he felt pushed toward politics after the assassination of conservative activist Charlie Kirk. Quote, "His example convinced me to get off the sidelines and get into the game and stand tall for our conservative beliefs." McCarron last played in the UFL last year. Already announced for the lieutenant governor's race are Alabama Secretary of State Wes Allen, Alabama Agriculture Commissioner Rick Pate, Opelika Pastor Dean Odle, and commercial realtor Nicole Wadsworth. And earlier this week, John Hamm, the ADOC commissioner, updated legislators on progress at what will become Governor Kay Ivey Correctional Complex. reports AL.com's Mike Kaysen. He said the complex, as of last month, was 75% complete. The facility is expected to be finished next year. The price tag is at $1.25 billion, and it'll have 54 buildings, 17 to house inmates. There will be 1,168 minimum security beds, 1,536 medium security beds, and 192 maximum security beds, plus 720 medical and mental health beds. Now, you may remember the prison system was battling a staffing issue a couple of years ago. They couldn't get anybody to become corrections officers. Well, since then, pay has risen and recruiting efforts have been implemented. Now, said Ham, security staff has increased 33% since March 2023, and ADOC expects to shatter its record for training academy grads this year. Well, we're going to take a quick break for some paid advertising. Full disclosure, we're actually trying to raise money to build a new ballroom adjacent to Down in Alabama Studios. I can't wait till the first ball. Then we'll come back after the break, talk about an Alabama town's water and sewage woes. Y'all stay with us. Thanks for staying with us, folks. Today we have a bit of a tale of woe for a small city in Alabama that continues to struggle with something that so many of us take for granted: indoor running water. AL.com reporter Margaret Cates is back in the Down in Alabama virtual studio to help us break it down. It's good to see you again, Maggie.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I loved having you so much last time. So we got to do this again. Here we are 8 months later or
Here we
whatever it
are.
is.
Yeah.
Can you take folks to Mobile County and tell us a little about what some of the locals in Prichard are dealing with right now?
Yeah. So this has been going on for decades at this point, but basically, the water and sewer utility is just not really functional. So what will happen is we'll have heavy rains, which are very frequent down here in Alabama, in South Alabama. We'll have heavy rains, and that will cause the sewage system to become inundated, and then raw sewage then flows out and flows into people's backyards. Sometimes it'll even back up into a church that I featured in the story. So the raw sewage is a real issue. On the flip side of that, you've got really, really old drinking water infrastructure. So about 60% of the drinking water that Prichard buys is lost. It just leaks out. And the church that I talked about that I feature, they have really low water pressure. They can't get enough water in the toilet. They have to use bottled water in the toilet bowl. They use hand
That is crazy.
sanitizer. Yeah, it's really, really dire. And so this has been going on for a long time. I've covered it for a few years now and decided to kind of take a broader look at the whole thing. How did we get here? How did things get so bad? And that's several months later. That's what this story is about.
Yeah, a local official you quoted even compared Pritchard's situation to a famously bad one, and you know, Prichard was not being compared favorably.
Yeah. So John Young, who is the receiver in charge of the utility right now, he was appointed by the court because the utility defaulted on a bond. So they went into receivership. This guy, he is from out of town. He has worked for other utilities that have had these struggles. He was actually in Jefferson County in 2011 when they declared bankruptcy. And he said, the infrastructure in Prichard is worse than Flint, Michigan. Now, a big caveat
Goodness.
with that is that what we're talking about in Prichard is the infrastructure. In
Hmm.
Flint, the issue was lead contamination in the water.
Right.
So that is not an issue that we're having in
Yeah.
Prichard, thankfully. But John Young said, from his time in Flint compared to his time here, the infrastructure in Prichard is worse than it was in Flint, Michigan.
Yeah, and it's on both ends, right? The
Yes.
sewage and running water. When you don't have enough water pressure to flush your toilet, you're using bottled water. That image just stays with me. I can't imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, it is on both sides. So the utility is under a consent order from ADEM, which is basically like you need to make these changes, and we are going to supervise you until you make these changes from
Mhm.
ADEM for both their drinking water and their sewage wastewater system. So
Okay.
they are really, it's really both sides of the
Mhm.
coin are struggling.
Well, a city doesn't just wake up in a crisis like this. Can you, I know there's you spent months reporting this one story, and there have been decades of issues. But if you can give us I know it's kind of an ask here. Give us a sort of an outline of the backstory that got us here.
Yeah, yeah. So it is very complicated. But sort of the starting factors, Prichard at one point was a very industrial city, with the shipbuilding industry in Mobile really taking off, in the World War II era. It was, it had become kind of a booming suburb because there was all this industry. It's in a really prime location, sort of just a mile or so inland from the Mobile River. But over the years, that industry went away, and so you're left with a shrinking city, fewer businesses, fewer people, the tax base really shrinks. So you're already kind of facing these headwinds. And then on top of that, there has been a lot of mismanagement at the utility. 20 years ago, we had two water board employees that were indicted for discharging pollution when a sewage line broke and spilled millions of gallons of raw sewage into a wetlands area. Now
Mm.
they were indicted and went to trial, and one of them was found guilty, but he later was able to get that verdict dismissed. Just a few years ago, there was a raid of the Prichard Water Board offices. There was a
That's right.
federal investigation and a state investigation. 7 people have been indicted criminally, and some are, awaiting trial, facing charges. But it's sort of a combination of these external factors, along with some sort of some internal self sabotage is what I would call it.
Yeah, which as we see in towns in the Midwest and Appalachia, there's there's a pattern here to these towns that lose their industry and go away, and then there's some either corruption or just inept leadership at times that make things worse. Well, there's been some changes in leadership in the city. Not that that's always the fix. Not that that always fixes everything, but what are some of the possible ways forward in at least in the near future? Is there any hint we could see another utility, uh, the state or the feds, anybody stepping in and playing a bigger role here? And what might current Pritchard officials be actually open to?
Yeah, yeah. So that's two different things. So first part of your question, we really have not seen a lot of state or federal involvement. For the most part, they've stayed hands off in the last 20 years.
Mhm.
Those consent orders, they basically, that's on the utility to fix those problems. Um, A&M is not going to come in and fix it for you. So that was something that was really striking to me, that there just really wasn't a lot of involvement from outside agencies. As for going forward, there is a new mayor in Prichard. Her name is Carletta Davis. She was and is a water and sewage activist. She advocated for the community for many years on water and sewer issues. And she was able to pretty easily win election as mayor. And 3 of the 5 council members in Prichard are now new. So there's been a changing of the guard, as as it were. But the solutions that have been floated are basically one of two things. They could concede the utility to a private company that would operate it, and then the board would still be the governing body. Or they could merge with MAWS, which is the Mobile Water and Sewer Utility that serves most of the county. I think about
Mhm.
70% of the county. Neither of those solutions are something that Carletta favors. When I talk to her, she doesn't want to privatize the utility, but she also doesn't want to give the utility away. But that's not entirely her decision. There's
Yeah.
a water board in place. It is under receivership, so the court will have some say, and then the bondholders, the people who loaned, the banks who loaned Prichard the money, they will also have some say. So, it's hard because there are these two solutions and neither one is really optimal, maybe, but
Right.
it's just going to depend on how things shake out.
Yeah, yeah, and if you're not gonna be open to be taken over, then you got to figure out how to fix it, and we'll have to. I guess we'll have to see what the court decides. Um, we're gonna definitely link to this in show notes so y'all can read more. And as you hear Maggie, who's doing a wonderful job, this is why I have you on because I can't be here by myself breaking this down.
Yeah.
What are we leaving out that's really important? We need to know about this topic.
I think it it is an easy thing. I think it's an easy story to dismiss or not pay attention to, because Prichard is a small town, or is a small city. There's about 24,000 people served by the utility, and that includes
Mhm.
the nearby town of Chickasaw as well. Um, it's a town, or it's a city where about a third of residents live in poverty. Um, Median income there is much lower than the rest of the state. It is a almost entirely black. It's about 88% African
Mhm.
American town. And so, it really is, and I don't want to make it sound like they're just so beaten down, because they're not. They're people just like everyone else, but it's
Right.
a very marginalized place. There's a lot of poverty. And so I think it's easy to kind of, say, well, that's not my town. That's not my problem.
Right. Right.
But, these people, someone needs to step in. So that,
Yeah.
I don't know what's going to happen. If they won't accept a private concession, if they won't merge with the utility, I don't really know what would happen. And also,
Yeah.
there are infrastructure problems around the state. This is a very extreme example,
Mhm.
but this is not something that is unheard of. There are other places that struggle with their infrastructure.
Mhm.
And so I think it is something that we can all relate to in that way. We all deal with
Yeah.
bad roads, bad pipes, things like
Sure.
that.
Sure. Yeah. And you mentioned the Mobile malls, the Mobile water board, and I know they're not like beating down the door to fix Pritchard or anything. And to add to the reasons why, I mean, that's a tough place to be water and sewage, right? I mean, Mobile has its own issues in places.
Yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
Mobile utility is not perfect either. They also have sewage overflows. It is sort of the nature of the beast living down here, living on the coast where there's low, low elevation, lots of rain.
Mm,
But they, about 20 years ago, they were sued by an environmental activist group under the Clean Water Act, and that lawsuit since that lawsuit, they've made millions and millions of dollars of improvements to their
mm.
sewage system. So change is possible. It's not, Moz is not a perfect system either. I don't know if Moz is going to be open to this. They
Right.
have been open to merging with Prichard in the past, and the board has sabotaged it in the past as well. But, there is hope for improvement, and there is, a better alternative.
Yeah, it takes good leadership and lots of money, and here we are with an underserved community having struggles. This is the now the part of the program where I like to play um, news meeting, budget time. What other stories are you working on out there? What can we look for? I know this is a hard right turn, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Give us a hint.
yeah. So I am working on a pretty big project at the moment. I won't give away too much, but I'm collaborating with the Atlanta Journal Constitution and
Okay.
the AP and the Post and Courier in South Carolina on a big project related to PFAS, forever
Mm,
chemicals.
yes.
That's not going to be coming out for a while, probably not until the new year, but that's taking up a lot of my time right now. And I did a long series on birds, the birds of Alabama, highlighting some of the state's unique birds. And while I'm not doing regular installments anymore, definitely have plans to revisit it and highlight, the cranes up in
Mm.
Gunnersville State Park and, other really unique birds that we have here.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I read so many of those. Yeah, I need to get with you off the air. This is a podcast; it's not really air, is it? But when we're not on microphones,
mhm.
and get some good links on that. I know the individual stories, but yeah, I'd like to include that in show notes too.
Yeah,
Yeah, y'all look for Margaret Cates, and I just searched margaretkatesal.com birds. It's a great series. I mean, I've learned so much, you know,
thank you.
from
I
reading
learned
that.
so
So.
much too. I didn't know much at all about birds when I started that series, and I went on my first bird watching trip a couple of weeks ago. So
Oh,
I
really?
think
Where'd
I'm
you
a
go?
convert now. So yeah, it's really fun. The pictures are beautiful,
Mm.
and Alabama is a hotspot for biodiversity. So this is a really
Yeah.
really fun way to highlight it.
Where did you go birding?
I went to the Dauphin Island Bird Sanctuary.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
You went to to the big place already.
yeah, yeah. Well, so I live in Mobile, so it was about a 45-minute drive for me.
Oh.
And it was a beautiful day. And I told myself, I was like, this is not a day that I can spend inside. So I
Mm.
went down there and I brought my camera. And it was a little past peak migration. So there weren't,
Oh.
peak fall migration. So there weren't too many birds, but it was a real exercise in, being quiet and listening and, kind of using all of your senses to, figure out what's going on around you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This is not that related, but my family and I stayed in Fort Morgan, my first time staying there a couple of weeks ago, and lots of fun. What a time of year to do that. So I know
Yes.
the bird watching trip was nice.
Yes. Fort Morgan, Dauphin Island.
Mhm.
A couple of weeks ago, it was just absolutely covered in birds. We're still getting some, but the peak of the fall migration has kind of passed. So
Okay. All right, folks. Margaret Cates, thank you so much for coming on and
yeah,
doing this with us.
thank you for having
Um,
me.
yeah, absolutely. You got to come back. Tell us about the next series. Tell us about PFAS, which are terrible, but we want to know about them anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it should be a good one. So
Thanks everyone out there for listening to us. We're going to be back bright and early Monday morning. Until then, as always, y'all come by and see what we're working on anytime you can. We're on the World Wide Web at al.com.